out and back uh, this past weekend or yesterday, and it
Yeah.
was a lot nicer to do that. It was actually kind of steamy because it was actually 80 yesterday, but it was just a little nicer, kind of knowing some of the turns that I wasn't expecting last time. Because the last time I attempted it was the first time I'd ever been on the trail at the same time.
Yeah, it's not easy doing a complicated link up when you haven't done like every single step before. And I know you've done quite a big portion of the entire trail now. So, the more you get out there and hone it in, the more comfortable you're going to feel with that. I was mentioning Tom, I guess he's listening in now. We were talking about like his goals for next season, and he wanted to go and kind of repeat a few races that he did this year. And I just thought that was really cool. That's something that I like to do, because once you know a course, once you've done it once, you have an advantage the next time, and it's easier to improve on your times because you kind of do know what to expect. Um, and not every time do you have the opportunity to go to a race and like practice running the segments and things like that. Sometimes the only opportunity you get to do that is literally when it's race day, or when it's time to put that plan into action. Which was kind of the case when you went after the first known time on that river trail. And now that you've done it, you've kind of got an idea of what a lot of it looks like. And if you do have the opportunity to kind of hone in on that again and again, little piece by piece, and now you've got a car, congratulations. That's so awesome. Maybe you can piece together some of those portions of the trail that you didn't get out on. So that way, doing it in the fall and all that, the weather will be, I think, to your advantage. And so hopefully you can just put it all together into something that is a bit more seamless, where you kind of just, I don't know, hit each small goal along the way and you just start clicking it off, and finish the 52 miles, because it's a long way that you have to go, and there's definitely a lot of unknowns and stuff there.
Yeah, that's the plan for the weekend runs until my what I'm been quoting as the redemption attempt.
Yeah, man, I think it's really cool that you wanted to go out and do it again. Honestly, it takes a lot of courage to go out, put a project together that's your own, that no one's done before, train really hard for it, and you worked really hard when it was event day, but it just things didn't go your way, and there's a lot of variables out there that contribute to that, and it's not necessarily fitness or preparation. The environmental factors and stresses from being out there for a long time in heat, very hot conditions, those kind of things sometimes are a little bit out of your control. And so bouncing back from that and having the courage to go and do it again is huge. A lot of people would just walk away from it and not want to go back, and that kind of like is a great example of grit and perseverance and things like that. Those kind of qualities are what separates people who are very successful in achieving their goals, and what people kind of constantly don't achieve their goals. It's being able to get back up and say, I will go and try that again, even though it didn't work out the first time. I'm going to put it on my schedule and train hard for it and do it again. And if I maybe if I don't get it on the second time, I'll try it a third time. Hopefully we get it on the second time, because I think you're going to be that much more prepared and know what to kind of expect out there. But that's the attitude that we hope that everybody else has. That's, to me, it's just a great example. I'm already anticipating telling your story about it, because we're going to get it this time. It's going to be awesome.
I'll actually take pictures on the run this time too. I think last time I took one picture, so I would have no good trail photos to share.
Yeah, take a few pictures. You got to have something to remember those tough efforts by. It can be a picture of you smiling, or it can be a picture of you just kind of like, oh, like in the middle of the suck, which definitely inevitably happens too on those long days. But Yeah, man, I can't wait for you to get back into it, and I know we're on our way, and it's pretty awesome. So cool. Well, maybe we've got a little bit of a smaller group today, which is totally fine. Because we're recording these now, so you'll be able to, at least when we host, we're recording, so you'll be able to view these on YouTube, with a private link, kind of at your leisure. So I don't know, Zoe, should we wait a couple more minutes, or should we? I don't know.
I think we can dive in.
Loosely
I had
chat.
forgotten to promote. I'd forgotten to post on our Facebook and Strava that we were talking today, so that could be part of it.
Well, that's fine because we're on YouTube now, guys. Big moves from Microcosm. We have a YouTube channel. Um, Hopefully, there'll be some other resources for you, along the way, other than just these calls and stuff like that. Um, but all in time. Nothing happens in 1 week or overnight. Not at Microcosm, anyways. A lot of small, very slow steps.
Small steps.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll put this question out to you guys since we've got kind of a smaller group, and maybe, if you don't feel comfortable talking, you can always input in the chat box below if a question or something comes along. But something that I mentioned a few minutes ago, and that Zoe and I talk a lot about, is when the seasons change, often our motivation or our attitude or our energy levels tend to change. And in Colorado, at least the last couple years, fall has been really hard for us, where the clouds come in, it gets gloomy, the leaves fall off the trees, the tourists leave. I don't know. Things just seem a little bit more bleaker, maybe a little depressing a little bit sometimes. And it gets cold, and it's just very obvious the summer adventure season, at least in my mind, and in just talking with Zoe about it. The adventure season seems to be ending, right? And it's like all that work you did the whole year, it's over. You had your chance, and now, it's going to be winter, and soon it's going to be snowing, and you're going to be putting on your spandex and going out there and trying to like stay warm and get your runs in. For us, like we wrote an article, and mainly this was Zoe's kind of creative work about motivation last week. But I think it kind of hinges on this time of year thing, especially if you live in a place where the seasons change. And I know we got some East Coasters on the call, and then, Robbie and Andrew, sorry, I don't know where you guys live, and if you have any seasonal stuff going on, but I definitely know for Simon, winter in Chicago gets a little bit brutal. So, you guys may be able to relate to this. But I thought maybe we'd chat a little bit about motivation and how to stay motivated, what motivation means and what it doesn't mean. Yeah, Oklahoma can be pretty cold in the winter, I hear, but I haven't been. But anyways, yeah, we wanted to talk about that. And if you guys have any questions that come to mind or comments, just feel free to hit us in the chat box, and we'll kind of try to address that stuff as we go. And I think the main, how I wanted to jump into this was just to talk about the fact that motivation does ebb and flow. It can be in the middle of your adventure season, and it can also be at the end of fall, or the end of winter, or whenever. And that's really normal. And the things that underlie motivation are things like purpose and commitment. And I thought maybe Zoe might want to jump in on that.
Yeah, so I actually started writing about this topic partially because, it's something that a lot of athletes grapple with, myself included. TJ and I have talked about it at length and how it plays out in our own athletic lives. But I had been reading the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, which is a deep examination of how people become successful through failure and perseverance, essentially. I had been reading it as research for my podcast, but realized it was even potentially even more applicable to my coaching life. And she talks a lot about how people who are successful, whether it's like in their career, in relationships, in their athletic pursuits, their creative lives, whatever it is, it's because they don't depend on the daily feeling of motivation as a determinant of whether or not they practice or train or work hard, right? Like the thing that makes you successful is that regardless of how you feel on a given day, you go out there and you stack bricks. And, you know, that's something that I feel, you know, like very acutely in my professional life as well. Like not every day I don't wake up and I'm like stoked to, you know, check email or like, you know, do trailer runner work or hit the logs. Like those are very real feelings. And sometimes I even struggle with guilt related to the lack of motivation, and coming to terms with the fact that lack of motivation is something that all high achieving people feel, and that just not being, I guess, a slave to it, like understanding that it's totally normal and it's okay, and then not letting your behavior reflect how you feel on a given day. So after kind of reading that and thinking on it, I actually talked to my mental performance coach, Addie Bracy, who has done some research on this arena. And what she was saying is that she, you know, she works with athletes both as a mental performance coach and as like a normal coach, like how TJ and I do. And she just works with people on noticing patterns of not letting feelings affect behaviors, but letting behaviors affect feelings. So more high achieving, successful people will allow their behaviors to dictate their feelings. Like whether or not you feel like going out on a run in the snow, you know that you'll feel better after the run, and you might even enjoy the process of going on a run. People who maybe don't have as much long-term success will say, you know, running in the snow is gross. I have a lot to do today, you know, maybe the run just doesn't happen. And allowing how you feel in any given moment to dictate what behaviors you pursue is not the best way to pursue long-term growth and achievement. I think, you know, the caveat to that is that, you know, in training, there are certain times, particularly with highly motivated athletes, where if you're feeling like really deep fatigue or a profound lack of motivation, it could be more useful not to force a run, right? Like that's something that we look for in terms of people maybe getting into like relative energy deficiency, a hormonal imbalance, or just, you know, plain old burnout or overtraining, is if you're typically really motivated and you have a day where you're like, I really can't make this run happen, sometimes it is best to listen to that voice and be like, okay, I'm gonna respect the fact that I feel very tired, that mentally there's something blocking me from doing this run. And that's a really tricky balance, but I think it comes down to the fact of looking at your looking at your behavior over time. If you rarely struggle to get out on a run and you don't feel motivated maybe one day out of 100, I think it's great to rest that day. If you're someone who struggles to run 99 out of 100 days, you know, maybe employing that behavior dictating feelings approach rather than letting feelings dictate behavior could be a better path to take. And that was that's kind of the bulk of the research that I did and where it started.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, for me, I find the topic of like, how do you get yourself out the door when you don't feel quite as motivated? Really interesting. Like psychologically, it's pretty hard to ask yourself, okay, go do this thing in the hopes that it changes how you feel now. Don't wait until you're motivated. Go out anyways. And then, you know, hopefully the benefit of that is that you're going to feel a little bit better. I think, you know, a lot of us have probably, if you've been training long enough, you've noticed the difference. Like when you feel good going out the door, you know, you're excited, you've got your shoes on, you're ready to go. Like you're not dragging your feet. You're not, you know, checking that extra email or whatever. You're just like, you grab your stuff, you're ready, you're excited, you hop in the car, you go to the trailhead. And sometimes for me, when I start to drag my feet a little bit, I'm like, you know, maybe my motivation is kind of, you know, ebbing a little bit. And I don't really look at this as like a forcing thing. I try to look at it as like a manufacturing thing. Like I'm going to do this thing because it's my routine. and it's going to help me manufacture the feelings that I want to get.
Right. Like you're letting your behavior
exactly
dictate the feeling rather than letting your feeling dictate what behaviors you pursue.
So sometimes when I'm on the run and I don't feel that good, and you know those runs where you're like, okay, 10-minute rule, like I'll just try 10 minutes and see how I feel. And I'll be very purposeful kind of in that 10 minutes. And I'll be like, all right, put a song on that you enjoy to run to. So I'll put something on that I enjoy running to, because a lot of times I've noticed in my training, when I feel really good on a run, almost always there's a song playing in my earphones that makes me feel really good. And then I'll manufacture a smile every few minutes, even if I don't mean it, because it makes a difference. And eventually that smile can elicit those positive feelings that you're looking for towards the end of the run. I also like to employ that like progression run strategy where I'll start super easy in the hopes that like my legs will come around later and I'll be able to respond to that and maybe up my pace a little bit, like not sprinting at the end or anything hard or even moderate. But we all know that there are different levels to like running easy. It could be like I'll start at a recovery effort and I'll finish running easy, for example. But I think, primarily it's about, how do you differentiate between like, am I really truly forcing it or am I manufacturing it? And if the goal is to continue to stack bricks, most of the time, I think you'll know you're manufacturing. You're trying to create those feelings for yourself later in the hopes that you'll feel better. And when you've kind of gone through some of these things season after season, you're better able to recognize it. And I think the important thing, at least for myself, is being open-minded to the fact that if I don't feel motivated today, if I feel a little groggy, a little tired, I stay true to my schedule. So I go out and I do the run anyways, assuming I'll feel better after. I just assume, and I have a knowing I'll feel better after because I had that sense of accomplishment after, or that sense of like, I can check that off my list. Like that was a step towards these goals that I have for myself. And sometimes that doesn't always like, play out. Sometimes you finish that run and you're like, man, that didn't do anything for me, like awesome. And then I just assume, the next day, I'll do the same thing again. And I know that if I repeat the same thing enough times, generally I'll get back to feeling good about the training, and that it might not be one day that determines it, or two, it might be that I have to kind of grind a little bit that whole week. And then that Saturday run, I'll feel a lot better or something like that. I think that is a very important thing to think about when it comes down to, your motivation. It's not that unusual to have a succession of runs that don't feel great. What would be unusual is what Zoe mentioned. Like if that succession of runs, you had profound fatigue.
I think if you like have the kind of day where it feels like psychically painful to run, that's like, those are the days you just take a rest day, which is, the exception. But if you're kind of having the like, that's the day that you do get out. And it's learning to differentiate between those two things, and then making sure that like, once again, that, your lack of motivation isn't rooted in some like, kind of like relative energy deficiency, making sure you're eating sufficiently, getting enough protein for recovery, getting enough sleep, and just taking care of yourself mentally and physically. And if like all of those things are there, then I think that's a really good way to be sure, like, okay, like this is just kind of the normal lack of motivation. I have my nutritional bases checked. I've been eating well. And that can give you a little bit more confidence to kind of assess that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another thing that we talk about a lot is the process of moving from a place of depending on daily motivation to a place of commitment, and then to a place of establishing what your actual purpose is.
Exactly.
And that's something we talk about a lot as well. I'd love to know for you what the process of finding your purpose has looked like. And I know that this is something we talk about being in the midst of, like it's a journey, not a destination. But I'd love to know what that has played out for you, like either in your career as a runner or a skier, and letting, on the days when you maybe have waning motivation, having commitment to a stated purpose helps you get out the door, helps you stack those bricks, helps you do the workout, or helps you commit to resting.
Yeah. Wow. Well, yeah, if any of you guys took a moment to check out the blog, there's a really interesting illustration about people who are laying like a foundation, and that there's actually, you know, three components to all of this. So it's not just the daily motivation. It's being reliant on your purpose or attached to your purpose in a healthy way, and having, you know, the commitment to get out there in pursuit of that purpose, or those like really those higher goals, right? So for me, sometimes my like why or my purpose or the higher goals, if you have a hierarchy of goals, are actually like really broad. You know, the reason why I primarily get out and train every day, even if I don't feel good, I almost never miss a run, or any, you know, or a training session, is purely because I know that if I go out there and get the job done, I will improve over time. And if I improve over time, I get better at moving through the mountains, whether it's on 2 feet running or on my skis. And so that process of building fitness, that process of kind of working in like a single-legged projected sport where you're like one leg at a time, moving, doing the same movement over and over. You know, running is like the foundation for me of both skiing and like endurance trail running, so to speak, or mountain endurance running. So that overall purpose is to improve at moving through the mountains quickly. And so in order to, you know, when I think about that, I don't actually always think about that consciously every time I lose motivation, but you know, you kind of subconsciously know, like, why do I want to get better? Well, one reason is I enjoy the act of pursuing something in which I can get better at. That would be an overarching broader goal or purpose too. And then maybe above that is because when I get better, I can move through the mountains on these broader terms at a higher level. And kind of for me, it's like giving yourself up to this mastery approach where a little bit each day you're cultivating something that speaks to you. And what speaks to me is moving through the mountains, being in these locations that are really beautiful and inspiring, that you can hopefully and ideally primarily only get to with human power, right? Like with your own 2 feet, whether it's skiing or running or hiking or mountaineering, whatever it is. You can take your running base and the fitness and the economy that you develop here and the strength and take it into many disciplines. But just knowing that and having also reinforced, so you cultivate your passion over time through experience. So when I first started actually really seriously training in running, to, you know, with the goal of, well, I would like to improve some of my performances at races, I did not really know how much it would propel me forward towards those broader goals that were very like ski oriented and related. And then I realized over time that committing to, you know, this training program that took me all year, that, you know, I did every day, actually made me a much better, more well-rounded athlete. So that's where, you know, that passion grew. So your passion and your purpose does not have to just be one static thing. You can cultivate that over years and you can tweak it and change it. Which I find is something that makes it fun and engaging to do these kind of things. If you're passionate, if you love to do something, you often stay committed to it. So that's kind of where that mastery idea, just getting a little bit better every day. If I go out and complete this training, even if I didn't feel great, if I was respectful to myself and how I felt and didn't overdo it in the effort department, I would generally be laying the foundation that will help me to improve. Now there's, you know, other times where you may end up going out and going a little too hard or trying to really force something through that you maybe that could be considered counterproductive. So I think in the process of staying committed and moving towards your goals, your overarching purpose, If it's to just move faster in the mountains so you can enjoy, wild and open spaces, like that's my purpose or my why. If that's something that speaks to you, or if it's something completely different, know that like forcing something doesn't always yield the progress that you want. So check in and be respectful of yourself and how you're feeling. Getting out the door and doing a super easy run because you're not quite feeling it is respecting what you feel. But in that same moment, pounding out that workout and doing it harder than your body is telling you to do it wouldn't be productive. So we want to make sure that when we're manufacturing this stuff and we're working towards our bigger goals, we really respect how we feel and we listen. I know Zoe kind of noted and mentioned that before.
And I think like a really good framework for interrogating that is seeing like, okay, how does what I'm doing today affect me long term? Does skipping the run today help me stay more focused, more motivated long term? Like if I go and force a run, am I upping my risk for injury, overtraining, burnout? Do I need to drop intensity, mileage? Do I need to take a bonus rest day? Like investigating like, okay, if I really intentionally take today as a rest day, does that help me train better longer term? Then like, yes, that is absolutely what you should do. But if skipping that, if there's not a really intentional thought process around like taking a bonus rest day today helps me stay true to my commitment and true to my purpose long term, then maybe, you need to think it through a little bit more, right? It's all about how that plays into what your long-term goals are, what your long-term purpose is, and making sure that you understand that every day is a part of that, right? And then that helps you just make better informed decisions, whether that is about resting or it is about getting out there and doing your thing. That just helps you make a better decision long term.
How does like internal and external motivation play into this?
Yeah, I think that's a super important question. And I love that we're talking about this because I think we both everyone is motivated by both intrinsic and extrinsic goals, right? Like both of us enjoy races and FKTs, but we also both enjoy getting better for the sake of getting better, no t-shirt or belt buckle required. And I think that, it's kind of like an ecosystem. Like you have to find balance in it. If you're only motivated by external goals, you're going to burn out a lot faster and you're going to have, I think, a less fulfilling career because you're allowing other people and external factors to dictate the terms on which you improve and the terms on which you find personal fulfillment, right? Like if the only thing that gets you out the door to train is races, then when COVID happens, you're going to go for a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. I think that's something that we all felt to a degree this year when the pandemic took away a lot of our external outlets for things. Intrinsic motivation, that kind of inner fire that enables you to train long-term with a focus on, I just really love the process. I love getting better. I love kind of fulfilling myself on my own terms. I think is it's kind of like, if you're trying to keep a fire going for a long time, right? Like you want some, at some points you want that really hot flame and at some points you want to keep those coals going, right? And like I feel like the internal motivation are those coals that keep that really consistent heat going throughout the year, right? And then there's going to be times where you're going to want to turn it up a notch, and that's a good time to use external motivators. Like I really enjoy fun FKTs and TJ really enjoys fast 50Ks. And we allow those things to help us kind of engage in different ways with our training and allow us to kind of turn up the heat on our training in ways that we might not be able to if we were just like, I just love the process and I don't need anything to keep me motivated. And I think that it also varies person to person. We're never going to force an athlete to race, but we do recommend finding a way of celebrating your progress, right? Like whether that's through like a personal FKT, a really cool adventure run, or a race. I think that having checkpoints dictated by yourself for yourself are really, really important, whether that's a race or not. So I think you really do have to balance the external and the internal motivators, because if you have too much of one without the other, I think if you're only ever internally motivated, then you're going to miss out on a lot of that challenge that comes from checking in with yourself through races, FKTs, competition, adventure, right? Like you kind of want to turn up the heat sometimes. But if you're always trying to go full blast, turning on that heat without that like low flame from the coals, then you're just going to burst into flame and you have like a whole training Hindenburg ahead of you.
I think where we sometimes with athletes see that as a really problematic thing is kind of in the season that we're kind of entering, right? Where we're getting into the heart of fall. And depending on where you live, you've got a few weeks before winter and or, maybe 6 weeks before, winter and it gets cold. So like if you're really externally motivated, you might have been like hopping from FKT or race all summer, trying to patch something together, and just going from one thing to the other. We kind of call that like a lily pad approach, where it's like you can't even finish celebrating finishing that race that you just did or that big mountain adventure without like literally already programming and getting ready for another one. And I know like, at least for us, sometimes we do our race schedules, in the spring. And then we kind of lay it out. And over the years, we've both started racing less because of that lily pad effect, where when you get into winter and the season is over, it becomes harder to like engage in getting out and training. If you've raced a lot and become accidentally or subconsciously more reliant on those motivators to get you through the daily training process. So it's really important to rely on, first and foremost, like those coals burning, like Zoe mentioned. Like, I'm out there because I like to get better. I'm out there because I have this mastery approach where a little bit a day over 10 years is going to make me a great runner, rather than a few races every month for this summer is going to make me an okay runner. And it's good to have those external goals because it really does allow you to utilize the work that you're doing. But come winter, there's very few trail races. And depending on where you live, the opportunities you have for even running on trail can be really limited. So it's important to have like a firm understanding of what your purpose is or your why to keep those coals burning. And that can be for some people. And I know for both Zoe and I, sometimes that is like a 6-month race goal. It's like January 1, we're going to do Athens Big Fork Trail Marathon because we just like that community event. But then after that, like the next goal will be like 4 or 5 months out. And and then we were like, okay, we've got to switch that mindset. And you've got to really think about like, I'm just digging in, I'm getting my 40 miles or 50 miles in a week. And I'm working towards, for Zoe, it's sometimes like Leadville 100 or another race that she's trying to think about in the future. Or for me, it's like a mountain race that's in August. And I'll put like that one goal on the calendar many, many months in the future. So it'll just be there. I'll be looking at it. But daily, really, I mean, that goal is so far away. So it's all about reattaching to your purpose and your why. Sometimes in fall, I like to think or reflect a lot on like how my purpose has evolved or how my passion for the sport has evolved. So that way I feel much more centered and connected to it when I get into winter, because it's only that's going to really drive you to get out there when it's snowing, when it's -5 degrees outside, when like last winter we had some pretty rough cold streaks here. So yeah, I mean, without rambling on it too much, I think understanding that like in a race season sometimes the lily pad is inevitable, but be careful of it, becoming too attached to that and needing that next event to get you through that next block of training. Make sure that when you finish a race that was meaningful to you, you take the time and give it the respect that it deserves and reflect on it before you put that next race on the calendar. Maybe think about, and I know this is kind of introspective stuff and not everybody likes to do that, but just think about like if there was meaning in that event to you, and then use that to help you continue to cultivate your passion, and to broaden your passion so that it's easier for you to be more intrinsically motivated during tougher times of the year. I'm not sure, Zoe, do you want to add something to that? Like, what are
I like to, I think if people struggle to run without a specific race on the schedule, then maybe they're not thinking big enough, right? Like whether or not, this is the first time in years I actually don't have a specific race on my schedule. And that is actually really freeing because, you know, no matter what I have ahead of me, every run that I'm doing still counts towards whatever I want to do, right? Rather than saying, oh, I don't have anything on my schedule, it's hard to stay motivated. I'm like more motivated than ever because I can train really effectively without the pressure of a specific event in a way that'll set me up to do well at anything, right? Like if I'm running a 50 or 60 mile week, that's going to count towards whatever I decide to do. So I'd rather bank those things now when I have time and I don't have pressure than, you know, allow the future to dictate what I do now. I want my now to be able to set me up for a future that I'm more in control of and have more power over. And that's kind of how I like to think about it. Like, you know, whether or not you have a, you know, a race in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you should be training in a way that doesn't necessarily respond to that so much as sets you up to make a better decision about that down the road. Your training should open doors for you, not close it. And, you know, no matter what whatever race 100 miler I do next year, like I'm already training for it, even if I don't necessarily know what it is, have registration or whatever. The work I'm doing now is still going to count for that. The work I did 5 years ago still counts for that. You know, every mile that you log, no matter what motivated it or how you got it in, like still counts. So let that at least get you out the door, and don't let, you know, needing to have like a carrot in front of you all the time dictate what you're able to do today, because you could be shortchanging you know, what that carrot could even be in the future.
What do you think then in terms of maybe some of the people on the call or others that are going to be out there listening to this afterwards on YouTube? What do you think about, you know, goal setting inside that lens or framework when you are in a training cycle or about to start a training cycle that's really about just building foundation and base? You know, say we're entering winter and we're going to do a bunch of like low volume economy work. We're going to work on getting a little bit faster every week, but we don't have that goal. What is your advice? What do you think about, you know, trying to get that carrot, trying to put something out there? Do you let that evolve out of the training naturally, or do you do some research? Do you do a combination of both? Or do you just like put something on there void of meaning, like I need to have something, so boom, let me get something on there?
I would avoid doing that.
Okay, we all do that. But
I feel like for me, whenever I have an athlete be like, you know, I just Googled 50Ks and I just put this on my schedule, that's always when I'm like, oh no, like, okay, we can do this. But when someone's like, you know, I did the research and I feel really connected to this race and I've got the story about it, and I just, you know, I know that it's going to be great. Like that for me, I'm like, oh yeah, whatever the training looks like, you've already assigned meaning to this and I can tell you're invested. For me, the way that I like to set and find goals for myself is I pay attention to what I'm enjoying in training. You know, whether that's like, oh, I'm really noticing I like these long runs, or like, oh, I'm really enjoying these speed workouts. I tune into what satisfies me in training, and then I orient my goals around that. You see people that are a lot more successful that, choose goals that are based on what they actually enjoy, rather than choosing, they're like, oh, well, I want to be a badass, so I'm going to like choose the biggest, baddest mountain ultra around and put that on my schedule, even though, you know, honestly, what brings me joy on a day-to-day basis is doing golf course miles, right?
Yeah.
So you should let what you're enjoying most days dictate a lot of your goals. And that, you know, is a little bit harder when like a lot of us, you know, if you want to run like UTMB or something, most of us aren't training on the UTMB course. We don't have a really great idea of how much joy we could find on the UTMB course. We have some suspicion we might find a lot of joy. And if you get the chance to sign up for UTMB, you should 110% do it. But you shouldn't let your goals be dictated by external factors. I think you should really be like, man, you know what? Like I love doing 100-mile loops with intermittent obstacles in them. And then that's what you sign up for, right? Like you shouldn't be like, well, you know, I hate arm day, but I'd really like to motivate myself to do arm day, so I'll sign up for this obstacle course, because you're going to have a really challenging race day and you're also going to hate every push-up in between now and race day. So like really investigate what brings you joy, what brings you happiness, and let that dictate your goals, rather than like trying to set arbitrary goals for yourself that you're not going to enjoy the process of getting there.
How flexible can those goals be? For example, what if in one season you love, obstacle course racing and you're all about it, but then the next season you're like, man, what about if I just like don't even do obstacles? Maybe I'll just do like 100 miles of continuous running. Like, what is it okay to be flexible? Is it okay for
It
those
is
goals to
okay,
change?
but you're going to have to change your expectations around things. Like, I don't want to tell people, like, okay, you have to arbitrarily pick what your favorite distance is. Like, and you have to, you say you're a 50-mile runner and that's all you're going to do. You're not going to run 100. You're not going to do an obstacle course race. We're not tough mudding. You're just doing 50s, because I think that's also a really quick path to burnout. But I think you want to, earlier in your career, or maybe throughout your career, experiment with different distances and disciplines. Maybe right now you're really into road marathons and you'll try trail later. Maybe you'll be a trail runner and you'll be like, man, I wonder how fast I can run a half. And you'll migrate to the road, and that can reflect different goals as well. But I think you want to balance consistency and curiosity, because if you spread yourself too thin over multiple disciplines, then you're not going to achieve the mastery you might want in a single discipline. But if you're maybe like, I'm not really sure what my true passion in the sport is. Do I want to qualify for Boston, or do I want to get into Leadville? I think that those two things are going to be tough to do in a single season for a lot of athletes. And so you do kind of have to pick. But if you're someone who's like, I'm not really sure which of those I want to do, I'm going to kind of dabble in them both this season, and then next season I'm going to build off of what I learned and experienced towards a more specific goal that is more in line with the process I enjoy. So I think it's just about adjusting expectations. I don't think we can't all be perfect at all things all the time. And it's okay to fail at things. It's okay to try a 100 and say, you know what, that sucks. I don't like eating ramen at midnight in the cold. I think it's okay to run a road marathon and be like, oh, I wonder if I could run 4 of these back to back in the woods. But you have to adjust expectations. But I don't think that you need to sacrifice, like your curiosity for that, because the thing that you're actually going to be really amazing at in this life, you're probably going to have to try a bunch of stuff that you're not that amazing at. And then you'll get to that place where you're like, okay, this is my calling. This is my discipline. I'm going to drill down. So I think it's just kind of like, it builds off expertise. It builds off experience. And that's why, running is it's a career sport. It's not something you just do for a year.
So I'm kind of hearing a couple of different things. I'm hearing, one, when you have a goal, I'm hearing commit to that goal and see that project through. If that goal provides the impetus for another goal related in that same discipline or a different discipline, for example, if your goal is to do an OCR event that was 100 miles and you completed that goal, but the impetus for that was like, wow, I really mostly enjoyed the running aspect of that. I just want to run 100 next time, then you work hard and you train towards that goal. So we have the goal, we execute on that goal via the training. The small individual goals along the way are the training days that get you there. And then you hit that next goal and you see where that takes you. And if that takes you to a space where you're like, that's what I want to specialize in, you go on, maybe you find another 100 that speaks to you deeply and you want to go do that. And I sense from your response that this is like taking a very long-term approach and being okay that over several seasons, your curiosities may change, or you may also just like develop this one singular focus. And that's where, you can really hone in on being a master of that, like actual like sub-discipline of running or something. But I also hear that there could be athletes out there who have multiple interests and they may want to have those interests play out over the course of one training year and then repeat that cycle year after year, because they like, fast road marathons, but they also like, running, on trails and being out in the woods for a long time or up on mountains. And I think my perspective on that is it's okay, that's fine. And you can use, I'll plug coaching for a second. If you're working with a good coach who can help you through these things, you can utilize each.
If you're not working with a good coach, I'm concerned about why you're on this call and how you got it.
Well, I'm just speaking really generally, but yeah. Just in case, somebody who
Ah.
doesn't have a coach is listening to this or whatever, not on this call, but on YouTube, guys, because we record these. You made me lose my train of thought. So, the faster stuff can support the longer efforts, because in improving running, it's all about turnover and economy and becoming more efficient. So if you start a season with a road half and you finish the season with a 100-miler using your coach's guidance, you can work through a very natural progression up to 100 miles. That makes a lot of sense. And because a lot of, for me, I like to think about progression as an approach to like getting better at things. Starting the season after a winter of speed work, it's very appropriate to do a half marathon or a 10K and test your endurance and your turnover on the roads, if that's what you're interested in. And taking that speed to the trails, it's awesome. You've got an amazing foundation. And then the specific work for trails can come in after that. So you get, kind of those neural pathways firing when it comes to the climbs and things like that. So for me, I say, if you have multiple interests, make sure that when you think about your goals and you're looking at those external motivators for the season, make sure you're plotting things out in a succinct way that makes sense. So it does set a progression where it's not like, okay, in April, 100-miler, and then in June, a 10K on the roads. Let's go. And that, because that really wouldn't make a lot of sense. It's not all progression is linear, but it doesn't really create a succinct path forward, which is where I was going with that. And I know all you guys work with a coach that could help you to create that. But of course, there's plenty of, most athletes are uncoached, which is unfortunate, but also, if you're uncoached and listening to this or will be, you've got a chance to kind of change the way you think about these things, which is really cool and interesting. Or if you heard something new through this conversation and you've started to think, oh, there's a new perspective and way that I can think about this. How do I go about that? Well, talk with your coach, us or Kristen or Kylie, whoever your individual coach is. Like, we're totally here to support you and all of that. I think we're kind of like towards the end of our time. Did you have any additions, Zoe?
No, not so much, other than that, it's okay to not feel motivated. Everyone struggles with that. All the most talented, athletic, amazing humans are going to have days where they wake up and are just not 100% stoked to do whatever they need to do, and to not feel guilty about that, because trying to guilt yourself into feeling differently has never once worked.
Mm-hmm.
So just accept how you feel and then try to do something about it that creates change. But, moping or being hard on yourself, engaging in negative self-talk has never once produced a more positive outcome for someone.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think we both, see in athletes periodically in the logs. Is you have a bad day or you're not feeling motivated, and it follows by a lot of negative self-talk. And although this, we like you guys to use the training logs as, a space where you can get your feelings out and talk about those things. When you reinforce those feelings in writing, it makes them a lot more powerful. So be very careful about how you word those things. Even if you're feeling them, you have an opportunity in that moment to reverse those thoughts via a dialogue in the log that is more, I would say, more positive and helps you move forward in a better way, where we're not hung up on a day where we're not motivated. If you're unmotivated, it's okay. It happens. If you have a day where you don't feel the magic spark, join the club. It happens to me all the time. It happens to Zoe. It happens to every athlete. But it's all about how you respond to those things. That really, truly matters. And one thing that I like to do if I really have a few weeks where I'm not feeling it, I like to run because I'm passionate about it, or it reaches my purpose. I try to just know, like, if I do enough of these things that I like to do generally when I am motivated, I will most likely feel better somewhere down the line. And when I continually enact those things that are expressions of myself or of the passion that I have, even after, one day it doesn't work, 2 days it doesn't work, 3 days. I mean, I've gone weeks where it hasn't, and then finally it clicks. And that's only under the circumstances where I have checked those boxes, like, yes, my sleep is good. Yes, I'm eating enough. Yes, I'm not dealing with external stresses. Because motivation sometimes takes a few weeks to get back, and it's good to be honest with yourself about those things and kind of go through a little bit of a checklist to make sure that you're not dealing with some patterns or some other things that maybe need to be addressed or talked about with your coach or doctor, and to just continue to move forward, right? Like, this stuff is all about progress. So when dealing with a lack of motivation, getting out there is progress, even if it's the 10-minute rule and being like, I didn't feel good after 10 minutes. I called it. I'll try again for 10 minutes tomorrow. We really look at athletes who do that and are like, good work. Like, you're doing something about not feeling great right now. And rather than kind of, I don't want to say wallowing in it, but almost it is just kind of help yourself. And you can do that by doing things that make you feel good. And not always is that thing going to be running, but sometimes it might be.
Taking intentional steps to be like, I'm going to get 10 hours of sleep tonight.
Exactly.
Right? Like, yeah. I know that the thing standing between me and being a boss tomorrow is just like, I haven't been sleeping great. So I'm going to set a bedtime alarm and I'm going to get those 10 hours. Or, you know what? I am feeling a little bit tired. Maybe I haven't been fueling correctly. I'm going to eat a big plate of nachos just to reverse how I'm feeling. Like, just throw whatever you can at the wall to be like, maybe I'm feeling tired. Maybe I'm feeling hungry. Maybe I'm not feeling motivated. But if I like sleep and bank a bunch of food and like, maybe just go on a walk, like just do something to like disrupt whatever unfortunate pattern you're in. Like, we all get there, right? Like, we'll be feeling tired, hungry, unmotivated. Just do something to disrupt that. And that can vary person to person. For me, it's sleep and nachos typically.
That's awesome. And for me, it's usually I haven't eaten enough. So I always like immediately start eating more once I start to feel my motivation dwindle. That was me on Saturday of this week. And you get better at recognizing those things the more you go through it. It's just kind of a natural thing that happens when you train enough. And I would recommend, paying attention when these things happen. Pay attention. Think about, what strategies you use to work through it. You don't have to write them down. You can put them in the log somewhere where you'd be able to refer to later. But over time, you start to learn like what your signs are. For me, it's always I haven't been eating enough if my motivation is lacking or I don't feel like getting out. That's me. Zoe is like, she says sleep or maybe nachos. She knows herself well. And you guys can all kind of get to that level. And of course, there are going to be plenty of moments where you're stumped. You're like, man, I've been eating tons this week and I'm still like, my energy's a little off. What's going on? And that can be cause for some other inquiry, which is okay too, because if you're not being okay is also all right. And we're here for you guys if and whenever that's the case. So don't withhold with your coach. Make sure you give them all the information that they need in order to, help guide you in the best way possible. Did anybody have any kind of questions? We got a few minutes left. If something came to mind while we kind of talked about commitment and motivation mainly, and purpose, and a little bit about goal setting.
Awesome. I mean, I feel like if you're showing up at 4:00 on a Monday, you've got a very healthy combination of all of those things going on. And we really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the most fun form of preaching to the choir. It's just like, talking to the people who like are really putting in the work to like take care of themselves and are curious to learn more and to like refine those processes. Like, the people that show up, in whatever way, like maybe it's being on the Zoom call, maybe it's listening later, maybe it's, making sure that you do check in 5 times a week with your coach. Like, the people that show up are the people that stay in it. And so we really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, you guys are doing awesome. We have another call on Friday the morning call, 8
Yeah.
a.m. Mountain Standard.
Coffee call.
Coffee. For our Euros, sometimes that's beer o'clock,
Yeah.
which is pretty great as well. So yeah, if you guys have a question, specific training related question, philosophy, methodology, anything you want to dive into, this week we had a new blog post on strength training and what that truly means for runners. I would recommend you guys check into that. If you've got any questions, please follow up. You can always send us an email. You can message us on iMessenger, text us questions. We're happy to address like really specific questions here because it helps everybody. So your question is probably going to help somebody else answer a question that they have. It also helps us with our learning processes, and we just enjoy it. So thank you guys. Have a great night. And I appreciate some new faces, at least for me, on the call today. Everybody have a good week of training. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.